All right, so while he's logging out and logging back in, everybody, my name is Matt. I am the host of DCN. That's Kyle, the editor-in-chief of Daily Crypto News. It is official. We both will be in Vegas for the Bitcoin conference to see Adam Schiff go on stage, prime time, talk about Bitcoin. I just watched a episode of him on what is it, the something coffee hour with Graham Stephan, and he is an idiot. So I'm excited to hear him get booze on on the Bitcoin conference. So if you're in Vegas, send us an email, send us a DM, say what's up. But today we're going to welcome David, who, if you listen to DCN today, he was on our show giving some of his opinions on quantum, and quantum is one of those topics that I think is very important. Everybody's been poo-pooing on it for years, but I think that we are in a point where quantum computing is going to be knocking at the door of standard cryptography, or I guess say mainstream cryptography. I'm talking about your emails, your passwords, your banks, and even more sophisticated cryptography like Bitcoin and even NSA or your DoD nuclear codes and encryption for the United States government. Um, we have companies coming out like last year. The big news was 1,000 qubit chips coming out. Microsoft just launched one this year that said they could scale it up to 1,000,000 qubits. Now, that does not mean logical qubits, but David, I love what you had to say. First of all, tell us who you are, what you're doing these days, and give us a quick skinny on what you think quantum is, and how, and are we in danger of losing all of our crypto?
Yeah, so thanks very much for having me. Pleasure to be here. So hello everybody, my name is David Carvalho. I am the founder and CEO of Nourish Protocol. This is a decentralized post-quantum security layer to protect blockchains, AI systems, and critical infrastructures worldwide. Started pretty much focused on defense, nation states, use cases, critical infrastructure and stuff like that. But we ended up getting into the rabbit hole of the quantum threat and research around those areas with a number of supranational institutions. And yeah, happy to be here, guys.
Thanks. Welcome to
Right.
the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks, man. So I had to find my as I was looking to see if we were actually live, which we do. We have about 75 people watching us right now. So David, so my question was, are we in danger, and how close are we in danger of losing all of our crypto?
Right. That's your question could have been, how much in danger are we of losing everything that's actually encrypted in general? Because the cryptography is the same, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter if you're talking about Bitcoin or if you're talking about Ethereum or if you're talking about like your medical records or even the nuclear codes. It's all based on what we call ECC, elliptic curve cryptography. And guess what? Quantum computers are really, really good at doing maths. And these things are at risk big time. And that's the only thing quantum computers are good at for the moment. It's just doing calculations. But unfortunately, the world's secrets, let's say anything that has value, is secured by traditional cryptography. So elliptic curve based cryptography, which is basically cryptography that's based on, it's really hard to calculate prime numbers in one direction and really easy to calculate them on the other. Quantum computers don't have issues that traditional computers have, like with working in sequence. So traditional computers work in sequence, so you need to do math in sequence. And quantum computers can actually work in parallel. So that isn't, the same problems don't exist from a mathematical perspective. That's why, you hear things like, oh, Willow has, solved the mathematical problem that would take like all the computing power on Earth together, like a septillion years in like a millisecond, right? So how close are we? Again, that's almost irrelevant, and I'll explain why. There are two things that are going on. One is we're, at high speed, moving at high speed towards some sort of like, not only quantum supremacy, but the quantum singularity. That is weekly, massive, how can I say, breakthroughs on the quantum area, so quantum computing area, that make it a lot easier to kind of like solve the engineering problems of a quantum computer, which right now it's an engineering problem. So if you throw enough power at the problem, you'll solve it. Just like putting a man on the moon, right? You just throw enough money at it, you solve it. It's not theoretical. It's a real thing. So that's what countries like the U.S., China, the European Union are doing. And for example, China has spent more on quantum that they spent on their nuclear program the last years. So that tells you how strategic that is, right, for them. So going back to why is it irrelevant how soon the problem is knocking on the door, how soon is Q day, let's call it. There is a big effort being done by nation states at the moment that are called Harvest Now, Decrypt Later. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this. I think I mentioned that yesterday on my recording. It just means that your keys, your transactions, your everything that's public on chain, which of course public and private keys are key pairs. So you can actually potentially, with the right computing power, derive one from the other. This is a problem not necessarily because quantum computer can break it right now, but because nobody ever changes keys, right? And it's the same for the validators. It's the same for the organizations that keep your health records, your financial records, so on and so forth, right? And all these keys are at risk. So quantum computers are eventually, most experts in the space say, 5 to 7 years, but it seems that every year is 50% closer. But I think we'll get to a point that it's not just 50% closer and it never happens. It's just like across the corner. So there's two main risks. One is your stuff gets harvested now, it gets put on a hard drive to be decrypted in 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and there's nothing you can do about it. The other thing is, Q day is here, and quantum computers are ready. Quantum supremacy is here. The arms race is finished, and cryptography is the casualty, and it's game over. But it's game over for everything, everywhere, and it would be the biggest upset from a geopolitical perspective in our generation, right, or in our lifetimes. So it's that level of scary. So it doesn't come with a warning; it just comes with regret. So the only way to prevent this is to actually be quantum resilient right now from a cryptographic perspective.
So, I just a couple follow-ups on that. Kind of love to hear your perspectives too. I've been talking on on my podcast for years now about quantum, and the thing that really gave me a jolt was AI, because we were talking about AI, years and years and years. There's gonna be this AI, and then uh, OpenAI came out,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, the first ChatGPT, and you're like, where'd this come from? How was this built? Who was working on it? I can't believe it's this good. It went from Will Smith like kind of eating spaghetti to Will Smith eating spaghetti made by Sora.
Yeah.
And so like it just flipped overnight. And so while we're talking about these quantum computing, we're talking about this qubit, that qubit, these new chips coming out. It's not going to be that we wake up one morning and go, hey, when is this going to happen? It's going to happen, and we're going to go, oh crap, how did we miss all of this?
And at
This is
that
and
point, it's going to be too late. Like at that point, there's nothing you
exactly.
can do anymore. Like it's game over. Your stuff is gone. And you mentioned about Bitcoin, especially crypto exposure, right? So very specifically, Bitcoin isn't invincible, right? It's mathematically vulnerable. It's cyber vulnerable. It's all the validators of Bitcoin are single points of failure. In other words, it's a collection of centralized systems backed by a cryptographic principle that allows for consensus. And quantum breaks all this. It breaks every single part of this. We either fix it or we watch it fall in time. So, and that's really, it's not an easy decision to make, but at the same time, it's a pretty easy decision to make, if that makes sense. So cold wallets themselves aren't quantum proof. What you think is secure may already be waiting to be compromised or to an extent compromised. Cryptography in Bitcoin is actually not complex. Like we're talking about 32 bytes, 256 bits. Like if you look, for example, if you connect to a VPN provider, insert VPN provider here, you're working at 10x that, right? The only thing that provides, resilience to the cryptography that's on the blockchain is the proof of work and the consensus mechanism. But guess what? Quantum doesn't care about it either. Because if you can break the transactions that are public, I make you a transaction, the hash is public. Hash is a different kind of cryptography. Okay. Like if that's public, I can break that. That's already like signed by you and it's being distributed to the validators. I can repeat that. I can change the destination. I can change the amount and they will validate it and the consensus will happen. And, you just got an attack against the chain. And I didn't even have to tamper with the consensus mechanism. We're actually writing
Right.
a paper about that right now, which is mega scary. Like you don't need to, it's every part of it is vulnerable alone, but together, all of it is also, vulnerable. So you actually need to go from the baseline and change that. So a chain is only as strong as its cryptography. And because everything right now in blockchains is cryptography. Blockchains think they are, working, floating around in the universe, that it's just cryptography. No, they're actually running from centralized devices that are miners, they are cloud systems, validators, right? And they're all single points of failure to that infrastructure that's on top of that. And we kind of
Right.
forgot about the infrastructure that is centralized as well. And that's also
Right.
at risk from quantum.
Yeah, we actually at DCN we did a series last year on just how many signatures it takes to move uh, a lot of the money on these major chains, right? Like most chains around crypto, the core people who are associated with like signing a movement of funds on the DAO, for example, it's just a handful of people, and at the time, what we were basically kind of saying is what happened recently with like Bybit, where they were socially engineered and
Oh
it
yeah,
was something that kind of the safe wallet was compromised, but there was a huge social engineering aspect to that
sure,
helped
sure.
that get that over the. And some of the largest hacks in history are also social engineering. What I'm understanding from you is that now there is like a completely new threat and new vulnerability to all these types of ways that crypto secures money through these quantum threats. So
Yeah,
I guess kind of I don't know if there's a question there, but I'm just saying like this is a completely novel vulnerability that I'm understanding, and
yeah.
so
It's
yeah,
a
just think
fundamental backbone vulnerability, right? So
yeah.
it won't be a hack. It will be silent seizure, right?
Hmm.
Like you won't even know what happened, right? Because
Hmm.
right now, call it social engineering. Of course, social engineering is a way, it's a means to an end, right? I mean, I want the password, I'm going to social engineering, get the password, get an access, exploit the vulnerability. Again, take over a centralized device. That's a server that keeps the keys. Then I move laterally. I take over some processes that Bybit uses that are critical to them, and that's it, right? But it's game over because of the centralization risk. So we, for example, we came from a perspective that's like defense related. So we had a number of mandates from NATO to actually fundamentally solve this problem with blockchains, which was really exciting. So how do you solve centralization with blockchains? The centralization problem, well, it's simple, quote, quote, from a logistics perspective to think about. Like you put a node everywhere. You take a fingerprint of everything that runs everywhere in all the operations and everything, and you achieve consensus over it, right? And that's really kind of like the point of everything that we have been doing. But the post quantum side of it is really important because it's about you know it's about the trust over what you're seeing, the trust over the truth, right? So a post quantum fingerprint gives you assurance that you don't have a higher threat actor that has quantum capability and it's changing the truth that you're seeing, which right now you have absolutely no way to prove. There is a bunch of assumptions that Bybit or anybody else has, right? About how secure their systems are, and the telemetry they're getting on their monitors is. How do you know anything of that is real? It's just a collection of single points of failure, right? So unfortunately, this is the reality. But quantum won't attack the blockchain. Let's say it will betray the math it was built on, right? So it's a backbone issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a more fundamental problem.
that's interesting because my theory. Okay, my theory is that you don't even have to destroy the blockchain. You don't have to destroy anything when it comes to Bitcoin. You just have to destroy the confidence. And
That's right.
the
That's right.
16-year stretch that we have with Bitcoin is that we have no double spends, we have no blah blah blah. There's no BS. Everything works as it should. All you
Yep.
have to do is have that one time, and then
Yeah,
it's the confidence is done.
that's right. Because for now, cryptography is deemed or accepted to be strong, but it's no longer strong. And that's really the backbone of it. Without that, it's all mush, right? So you need to level it up, right? If
Yeah,
you don't, you should assume compromise, right? And that
yeah,
itself, even without like proof of breach, it's itself going to impact price, and it's going to impact like, oh, there was a big hack. Like, how the hell do you know it's a
yeah.
hack?
And something I understand about Bitcoin is like, for example, when it does an update, there's not a lot of like validators or computers that are participating in that update.
Yeah,
Where, for example, with Ethereum, with like the merge or even the recent Pectra update, it requires coordination on all of these validators, like thousands and thousands of them. Where on Bitcoin, what I understand, and I might be wrong, I understand it's like less than a handful. So the vulnerability there is, there's just less. So there's less, like the risk probability is higher when there's less, is my point. Um,
I don't disagree with you. I think that the risk is transversal to any chain
mhm,
that is on top of the same cryptography standard, which are all of
yeah,
them. So,
uh-huh.
so what I would say, obviously, what I've heard from the conferences I've been in, like, I don't know, Bitcoin conferences, global Bitcoin conference, and other stuff like that, just speaking about Bitcoin, because it's the same principle, honestly, for the others. Bitcoiners assume that quantum is like 15 years ahead. Don't worry about it. I can tell you that tech moves faster under classified budgets, and they
Right.
don't care about the details that you care about. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
the environments that I work with, for example, around nation state level, cyber commands and stuff like that, they are very aware and they are very scared. And they have been for like 5 years. And they probably have reasons that they don't tell me. But for example, the
So
NSA and NIST themselves, they aren't preparing for 2040, 2045. They are preparing for 2028 or 2030, right? That's like
right.
they're making the laws like right now. And remember, legislation and regulation comes way after innovation, right?
Right.
So that's,
So
should keep an eye open for that.
So one thing I've been saying on the show a lot that this is going to be the last halving without a quantum resistant Bitcoin. This is my opinion. If we do have another halving with quantum resistance, then the Bitcoin community has lagged, and I would be very skeptical. This is just my personal opinion. I'd be very worried if we have another halving and we don't have quantum resistance before that next halving. You said and that the security DoD NSA has given a deadline for the United States government and all of our defense to be switched over to a quantum resistant ledger by 2030.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I think this, but do you think that requirement is actually too late? Do you think that there should be more urgency on having it done now?
Yeah, so yes and yes, and I'll explain a little. So they are publicly preparing for 2030. Privately, they are preparing for it much, 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 much sooner. Right? This is always the case in these environments. Yeah. And in my
I think
experience, that's what I would say. Like the greatest threat to Bitcoin isn't regulation, right? Or whatever they think it is. It's quantum exfiltration by a state actor while the world's asleep, right?
Mhm.
And there's nothing you can do about that. You won't even know that happened. Like for the longest time, that threat actor would have absolutely no interest in you knowing that happened, because for the longest time that they can keep these under wraps and point at somebody else and say, "Oh, that was a hack." No, no. How are you going to know, right? So that's their
Yeah,
advantage.
so I mean, I have like two things in my head. Like one is these threats you're talking about. It makes me immediately think of the incident that just happened in Western Europe, in like Spain and Portugal, of
Yeah,
like
I'm in
an entire
Portugal right now.
system.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
something else. It was like like zombie apocalypse level.
Yeah, yeah. And so I used to go see these interviews in San Francisco where they used to have these speaker series. And I saw Ted Koppel speak, who used to be a really famous reporter for PBS in the United States, has interviewed everybody under the sun, has won all these accolades, blah, 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 blah. And one of the questions that was asked to him was, what is the biggest threat you could see to the United States right now? And his response was an electrical grid threat, because
Yeah.
there's a minimal amount of grids in the United States. I think there's six or seven. There's four
Mhm.
big ones, then Texas, and then Alaska and Hawaii are kind of independent. But this makes me think of like how much of a threat is quantum even to itself, of like killing the grid that it's on by like hurting itself. But at the same time, like, and this is maybe a question we could come back to, is like, how much of a threat is quantum to just Bitcoin like mining computation itself? Like, how could it put proof of work like out of work, basically?
Yeah.
Like,
So
is that going to
that's
be just obsolete in the future?
the second one I have already answered. So at least under the standard that exists right now, proof of work is obsolete instantly.
Yeah,
Under this, because you don't need it. Like you can tamper with the consensus because you don't, the consensus is doing its job, but you already tampered with the transaction. So the consensus is just going to validate the transaction you already tampered with, right?
yeah.
So the consensus itself needs to be upgraded. The first part of the question, interestingly, I've been in a conference that was about very, very extreme stuff, like, oh, let's blow up an EMP bomb, and there was a study about that, like in the upper side of the Earth's atmosphere, and see what happens in the northern hemisphere. And the projections were very similar to just the electric wipeout, because that's really what happens. And it was absolutely horrible. I'm not sure you can find the information about these online, but it was something like 98% mortality in cities or urban areas with more than 1 million people after 6 months. And that's just, it boggles the mind. But if you think about it, it has to be true, because all the supply chains go away. Without power, there's nothing. You'll be impressed with, there's nothing. You can't make a phone call. You can't open the faucet. You can't, how long until people start eating people? That's the question. So the will quantum lead to these things?
Damn, we went there already. We're eating people now. All right,
Well,
Step
this is
one
this
is
is
cardio,
I had to
cardio,
ask that.
right?
I mean, I
Step
don't mean
one.
to be like 40K aficionado, but the question is like, you know, your question was like, how deep do you think the threat is? Well, I can tell you, I
Yeah,
am in deep conversations with nation states and their risk ledgers and so on. The threat is absolute. Like it
yeah. I
can't
feel
be
like it's
bigger than that.
compounding.
It's
It's a
compounding.
compounding threat, like each direction you
It
could
is.
look. Like my mind just like starts to explode, because I'm like, if you're just saying that cryptography is cracked, like everything that secures everything, like as you're saying, it makes us have to fundamentally rethink, like at like an infrastructure layer, at like a basic security layer, how we build all of these systems.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. But we're
you
not.
know,
We don't have another option either.
yeah. And this kind of comes back to, I've seen some crypto projects. I've personally did some work with a project called EigenLayer, which, what we've seen through the lens that it's trying to do is it sees that AI has a verification problem, right?
Yes,
As you were kind of talking about this earlier, AI, how do you know where it's sourcing things? How do you know what its bias is?
absolutely.
Where through one lens you can of picturing eigenlayers, you can see that blockchain's use case, or like what it's built for, is to do that, is to help be able to verify that. But it almost seems like
Absolutely.
even through quantum, like it might nullify that, and it might, you might need quantum to do that, and make it more powerful or something like that. So I guess my point here is like, can you talk to that point of like how our AI needs verifiability, and
100%.
how much of a threat that is?
100%. So I can tell you, like, all the countries that we end up speaking to, and the sovereign funds and so on, if you take a look at countries like, plans for 2030, 2040, right, which are public technology, plans, you will see you will see quantum there, right? You will see something akin to trusted AI, and sovereign AI there. Nobody really knows what that means. But what I believe it means, at least from the conversations I've had, is exactly what you're saying. Like right now, AI is being done, pretty much in a mundane context. Like maybe, the worst, the biggest use cases for it are enterprise. But very, very soon, if not already, they're going to be driven by countries, right? Their own kind of like sovereign supercomputer AIs, right? That deal with like maybe military services, maybe government technology, maybe, who knows, right? The most important strategic things for that specific country, maybe futurism, whatever it might be, right? Research and development. So that's going to happen. But quantum is so much larger than this, right? Quantum is both like the engine potentially for AIs to be on top of, but it's also the source of potential verification of everything. Like if you want to, and this is why we use post-quantum fingerprints for really everything, all compute, right? If you want to prove that an AI model is trusted, well, put it on a chain and you take, ideally in a highly resilient environment, if you're talking about like nation state level, post-quantum fingerprints of it, right? And you put it on the chain. And then you have a bunch of validators that are known to be trusted, again, more post-quantum fingerprints, that are participating on this ledger, validating. But if you look at chains right now, there is a massive gap between where we want to be and where chains allow us to be. And that gap is regarding trust and verifiable trust, provable trust, right? Which was the point I was making before. How do you know you can trust the thing that you're seeing? Because even the cryptography of it can be changed or broken. So the truth of it can be changed, in transit or whatever. So the way to, right now, all validators in all chains are basically unknowable from a trust perspective. Like they are single points of failure. Okay, again, like they are centralized things that manage a decentralized thing, right? So you don't know if they have been hacked. You don't know if the validators or the miners are being tampered with. You don't know if they, if the password to access all the miners in in Kazakhstan, whatever, somewhere is like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't know if they're colluding. You don't know if they're using any encryption at all. You don't know if they have an antivirus installed. You don't know anything. So for all effects and purposes, if we're talking about something that you would like to be extremely resilient, like to even nation state level, which is what I think something that's worth $1 trillion should be, you should have transparency and visibility with full, post-quantum accountability of what actually is real. So you provably know. And all the participants need to be in a trusted state, which right now none is, right? There's a lot of assumptions. And the only thing that is being relied on is just the cryptography, that is. But this is valid for everything else, not just for, Bitcoin.
David, I know you have a 5 o'clock. I think it's 5 o'clock your time that you have to get to, which is past already. But I have one last question before you go. You can make it really quick. Um, are you hearing that the Bitcoin community, the devs, are talking about this now and thinking about enacting it? I don't hear anything.
Well, maybe I'm in a bubble, but I have heard it once. And there's a guy that's in Asia that's a good friend of mine, and he has access to some devs that are pretty respected in the Bitcoin community. And well, there was interest in talking about that and finding some path, and I've actually been part of such a call. Having said that, there is a lot of like awareness and education that needs to be passed through. Nobody knows everything, right? I'm learning all the time. Everybody's learning all the time. We just need to be humble about that. And the problem is how can I say, it's a survivability event, right? So you don't want to leave it for tomorrow. Like if you ask your former self, oh, if I do this every day, I'll get cancer, and you could go back in the past, you wouldn't do that every day, right? So that it's the kind of it's the same principle. We just need to be honest about that and stop slacking, which is a very human
Right.
thing to do, by the way.
I don't know if they're slacking, but I almost feel like there's a sort of arrogance. Maybe that's a bad word, but we'll use it for now. Arrogance in the Bitcoin community of that this is the perfect system. So therefore, why do we talk about it? The other thing is I'm wondering is do they have um do you think that they have the skill and the ability to do what Satoshi Nakamoto did and make a quantum resistance solution that is as elegant as what is there now?
Well, yeah. So again, I agree with your word, but just to be more, I don't know, politically correct, I would use something like complacency. I would say maybe overconfidence. Is kind of like what's going on. That's at least what I see. There is like a legacy worship. That's a mistake, in my opinion.
Wait, you just use it. You said politically correct and you used a synonym. I said arrogance. You said overconfidence. I think it's the same thing, brother.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Again, English is not my first language, but but
But
I
yours does
think
sound better. Mine doesn't sound as good. You're right. You're
I
right.
think there's definitely like a denialism of some kind, right? Some kind of like
Right.
legacy worship of what is there. Let's worship this legacy thing. That's the best thing ever. But that is a mistake, in my humble opinion, and I agree completely with you. Like I actually I wouldn't change any word you said, but that's you know. So answering your question directly, well, the
Are
crypto's
they
greatest
capable? Are
weakness.
they capable of making a quantum resistant
Yeah,
addition to Bitcoin that is as elegant as what Satoshi Nakamoto did?
I think yes, because that's the only thing that
Okay.
needs to be changed, honestly. Like if you're not talking about like the principles of the consensus and stuff like that, that's literally the only thing that needs to be changed. However, that is not trivial, right? The greatest weakness there in Bitcoin is not in the code. The code is excellent. It's I would say it's the word you said. It's the arrogance of thinking it never needs to evolve. That's the biggest risk.
David, thanks for popping on. I know you pop off. Kyle and I will finish it up, but thank you for sending that clip over today. Thanks for popping on to the live, and let's get you back on to talk about quantum. Hopefully, we do it via a functioning society and not with sticks and stones, and in a crumbled quantum non-resistant society. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, David. This was a pleasure. Ciao. Até logo.
All right, well, that's dystopian. I had a lot of fun talking about the world ending thanks to cryptography and 6 months of eating people. Great, that's great.
Makes me think of Zombieland, right? Step one, cardio.
Yeah, I like that, man.
But I
I
mean,
got that.
it's he's right. I mean, his point there at the end of like the evolution, right? I think if you can think back to there's a quotation from Thomas Jefferson that basically just says like constitutions themselves even need to be updated. Like, and that's why the U.S. Constitution itself was built with mechanisms
Mhm.
for it to be updated with amendments because
Right.
it's truth. Things do evolve. I was just recording a podcast earlier today, and uh, I asked this fellow, and this will be coming out on DCN hopefully later this weekend. But I asked him what is one of the pillars that he falls back on crypto, and the thing he said was progress and progression, and that the industry has the ability to innovate and change and make things better. And I think that's a really interesting part of what David was just saying is that Bitcoin can change. You can implement a change. Ethereum, you can update the system. And it's he's David is of a group of people who is basically trying to sound the alarm of what's being built with quantum. And so people just need to heed that call. I mean, there's problems
Right.
everywhere in the world, right? So the thing is will somebody use quantum against these systems before they have a chance to fix them or update them?
Yeah, absolutely. And just go back to part of that conversation is I haven't heard much conversation about a quantum resistant Bitcoin. I know there's companies coming out to try to push it that way or have some kind of quantum resistance blockchain themselves to I guess maybe find the market fit if quantum comes in and somebody takes over Bitcoin for the most part. But I haven't heard that talk, and you're 100% right. The Constitution of the United States plus we saw a lot of evolution. We see constant evolution with Ethereum, with different upgrades. The last one was Petra. The most significant one was proof of work to proof of stake. You can debate if it was a good evolution or a bad one, which we have done on Twitter Lives before, thanks to your organization. But um, things do evolve, and Bitcoin, to be perfectly honest, is one of the slowest evolving things in the crypto space. And when you suggest evolving in any way with Bitcoin, trust me, you're going to get a shitstorm of criticism from people that want to keep it static. We heard that with the block size wars. Now, I think that was probably the most significant argument and debate I've seen in Bitcoin for a long time. I mean, ordinals was a big debate in filling up the network with inscriptions on satoshis. There's a lot of things that are but that's just figuring out. I don't know if that's actually evolution or figuring out how to use Bitcoin in different ways, or actually evolving the purpose of Bitcoin. But anyway, long story short is there needs to be a serious discussion about quantum, in my opinion, and it has to happen now. And we should be implementing, like he said, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean the threats are like obvious. Every computer system in the world is uh under threat,
Well, Apple
right?
already did it with iMessage. Remember, they had quantum resistant iMessage now. Obviously, they see something.
Yeah. Um, I think he yeah, I think he can there's something there. Um, like I think what he was saying, David, I'm trying to piece this together. What David was saying earlier was like that these proprietary systems, like closed systems, move fast, right? That's Apple's example. Apple's able to do this because they're small and agile. Bitcoin is open and public. It's going to take a lot longer for it to do this. You're going to need, despite the fact that there are just a handful of people helping and influencing the core of Ethereum. It's or sorry, the core of Bitcoin. I mean, all these things. So yeah, I'm on your side. I think it is important that is addressed.
Yeah. All right. I think we went for 43 minutes today, and this was going to be a good write up. So anyway, everybody, Kyle, do you have anything to end on, or should I just wrap it up?
No, just this was a completely novel problem for me to hear about today. I mean, I knew it kind of was there, but to hear it from David more directly, yeah, is concerning, right? We gotta talk about this. We gotta get this under control.
Absolutely. All right. So for Daily Crypto News, go to dailycryptonews.net. Subscribe to us. If you want to hear the write up of this, that we will do probably for tomorrow afternoon.
Hmm.
Subscribe over there, dailycryptonews.net. Put in the email; it'll be sent to your email in our daily newsletters. Kyle is our editor in chief. My name is Matt, and I am your host of Daily Crypto News. We will see you tomorrow. Thank
If
you
you're out in
very
Vegas, let
much.
us know. If you're going to be
Oh
in Vegas
yeah.
at the end of the
Hey,
month.
you know what? I was thinking, by the way, and maybe we should talk about. We'll talk about this outline, but I'm gonna put it out in the ether. Maybe we'll get some messages if anybody watched a 45-minute live that started with talking about Stephen Kwan, um, which I got to edit out. Should we do a DCN meetup in Vegas?
I'm trying to do one in San Francisco before that.
A
But yeah, we could do
DCN?
one in Vegas.
Why don't I know about this? Why don't
Well,
I?
it hasn't really been confirmed. There's
Gotcha.
likely a meetup going to be happening, but yeah, I don't know a lot about it. But yeah, doing something in Vegas would be hella fun. We could do it.
Yeah, maybe we should set up a meetup where we drink some beers, talk crypto, and organize a quantum resistance push for Bitcoin. Anyway, all right, guys. See you later, Kyle.
Ciao.